This is a production of Cornell University.
It was planted with a 6-row cone seeder, and the plots were planted parallel to the driveway here. So these are 4-foot by 20-foot plots. And so as you progress down the field away from the driveway, each strip is a different cultivar. As you look from west to east, these are our 4 replicate blocks. So each cultivar is present here in 4 replicates. This, the third block here, we have put up signs so you can look at the different varieties. On the ends of each block, we have a guard row, which is the same cultivar as the first one that you see with the sign. So on this end, Carmagnola is the first experimental plot. So the guard row adjacent to that is Carmagnola. So we have 5 types bred for fiber. This is the first block here. And these are nearly ready to harvest. I need to submit our harvest report form so that Ag and Markets can come out and sample it. But this is pretty much the time when you want to harvest for fiber with a sickle bar mower, when you're just seeing the start of flowering here. You don't want the males to start to senesce, then the fiber in those plants will start to deteriorate. So the first set of blocks here are 5 fiber types. The next block, as you proceed down the field away from the driveway, are 14 short and early maturing grain types. Now the challenge that we've had is getting those shorter grain types established and getting them grown up enough to compete with the weeds. And these are the varieties largely that have been bred by Hemp Genetics International, and Jeff Kostuik will talk a little bit here in a minute. So they have very good yield potential, but the main challenge that we faced is in the absence of herbicides for weed control, they just don't get up tall enough and compete with the weeds, and I think you'll see that. They are mostly dioecious. So if you're a CBD grower and you've never seen a male plant, here's a good opportunity to look at some male plants. And then the third set of blocks down on the far end of the field are 18 dual purpose. So grain and fiber, they tend to grow taller or late maturing types. So take a look at those. Many of those are monoecious. Monoecious meaning that they have both male and female flowers on the same plant. So I'll get back to that in a minute. In terms of fertility, we spread 75 pounds of NPK at the time of planting, and then we top dressed with another 75 pounds of ammonium sulfate after about 3 to 4 weeks. So this field has received 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre. What I want to highlight, you can certainly go and look, there's a lot of variation in growth form, in flowering date, in leaf shape, and I'm sure in THC content among these types. What we have added this year that we haven't had access to previously are 3 new varieties being marketed and imported by 5 Acre Enterprises based in Virginia that were bred in Ukraine. So look at those. Our previous Ukrainian variety from the Ukraine Breeding Institute was USO31. That is in here also. One feature we have noticed already among those 4 Ukrainian types is they tend to be very susceptible to Japanese beetle. So you should be able to notice that pretty obviously. The other varieties really don't have any pest or disease damage on them at this point. So that's Hiliana, Hilesia, H51, and USO31. So otherwise, so the other varieties that we added 9 varieties from China. And I think you'll see that those tend to have larger leaves. They all seem to be fairly late maturing, meaning that they were probably originated and adapted to lower latitudes in southern China. and we'll see if they actually reach maturity here, or when they will reach maturity here at our latitude, and if they go hot. So I will say that based on some cultivars that we tested last year, which originated from China, those had some genes for THC production, and were very close to the regulatory threshold.
I'm actually about a 4.5-hour drive north, so we've supplied a fair bit of seed into New York State this year. ANCA for the past, since 2017, I guess, so maybe that's why it's the white rat for a lot of these experiments. But anyway, the certified seed production process starts with breeder seed. The original breeder seed stock from ANCA is the first Canadian born and bred variety from a Romanian plant breeder in 1995. So this is an old seed stock that we're working with. It's gone through many rejuvenations of breeder seed, so we're getting kind of old. But it's still a decent performer in the trials, even 20-something years later. So we're going to keep working with this variety. We're going to keep cleaning it up, trying to maintain it. But it's a pretty vigorous outcrosser. And from the production of pedigree seed starts with breeder seed. We go through a foundation generation, usually 1 or 2 acres, where we do a lot of roguing, basically every day in the field looking for male plants, and then a registered seed, and then a certified seed level. When we get to the scale of certified seed production, the labor becomes much too much to cover all those acres in an efficient manner. And we have to make sure that we're doing a good job in earlier generations to maintain that through, to get a good, clean variety to the commercial level. We have seen differences in the flower expression. It's not fixed at all. Even different nitrogen rates can have a big effect on swings. You can see in the field where that second application of nitrogen petered out. If you ran out in the applicator, with the male flower ratios popping up in the field, weather dependent can affect the flower expression as well. So it's a challenge to stay on top of that stuff. So that's what it is, but there's quite a bit, I think, more work year to year that goes into maintaining a monoecious variety.
Thanks a lot, Reuben. Yep, we've been working with Reuben quite a bit since 2017 when he supplied us with 51,000 pounds of seed. We planted 1,700 acres here in New York. I should have mentioned the planting dates. So our 2 planting dates are June 28th and July 12th. So again, quite late, but we had a very wet spring here. I think the crop insurance last planting date for corn was June 28th. So again, I would encourage you to look at those crops and evaluate the potential for using hemp as a mid-season crop if you were delayed and could not get your corn in. I think it has some potential there. We're also very fortunate to have Jeff Kostuik here from Hemp Production Services and Hemp Genetics International, one of the world's experts on fertility. And so Jeff's going to give us a quick overview of hemp fertility and how much it really needs.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot, Larry. So how many grain and fiber producers do we have right now? Reuben. So yeah, just as I thought, just as my phone calls initiated. So the phone's been ringing off the hook like crazy, as you can imagine, but I would say 90 to 95% of the US calls have been on CBD. And for those that don't know, the Canadian varieties, our regulatory process, we test much differently than testing up until harvest. We need to test at a specific calendar or a specific plant physiology stage for us to meet that regulatory method. So basically, what our book says is that when 50% of the seeds resist compression is the time that we test. And so if we were to try and grow any of the cherry varieties or any sort of high CBD varieties, they definitely would not meet our regulations and would blow over, so to speak. So the Canadian varieties under that regime are in the range of, I would say, 2 to maybe 4% CBD on a maximum, as you would see here with males and intact in the field. So we are definitely looking at mechanized harvest for on the CBD side. Again, the same thing with us. I have a hard enough time finding someone to help drive a combine that has auto steer that you press the button and it goes by itself down the field. So to try and find, and I don't think I have 40 friends, but if I did, to try and get them to come help me harvest hemp would be, just an impossible thing to do. So we are really looking at broad acre. So a little background, I guess, on myself too. So I'm a pedigreed seed grower for the company. My brother-in-law and I farm about 8,000 acres in Canada, of which mostly we've got about 500 acres in pedigreed seed production for hemp. I've been growing hemp for 21 years. Started in 1998 when it was first legalized, and most of my background became on applied research. And so the importance that I felt as a company, partnering with Cornell, other universities, ag universities, and being able to have them evaluate so that I can become a better agronomist to help give you better information on our varieties and other varieties is extremely important. So that's one of the reasons that I think it's just very thankful to have Cornell doing a lot of this work. So our varieties do not look very good here. They are really just knee high. So what we did, essentially, I'll just back up again. So CRS1, which is kind of our flagship, it's the one that's the Czech variety in Canada. And on my farm right now, just before I came out here, I was measuring, and we were at 2.2 meters, so just slightly a little bit taller, maybe another 6 inches of this variety. So you compare that with what we have here. So there's a number of different things that are going to affect that biomass. The first thing is seeding date. So June 12th would be on the later side. We do promote that in our area for organic growers because you can get a very good weed kill as you get that second flush of wild oats or whatever. So that works very good. But what we've also been breeding for is to shorten that variety. So we crossed it, and we wanted it to be that 4 to 5 feet tall, and then we selected for herbicide tolerance. So in Canada, there are currently 2 herbicides that are actually registered. A pre-plant is called Edge or ethafluralin or Sonolin, I believe it is here in the US, and then Assure 2 is a grassy herbicide that can be sprayed. So with weed control, I don't mind if hemp is this tall. One of our biggest issues when we first started harvesting the 12 to 15 foot plants that came out of Ukraine and USO, that's how tall it'll grow in Canada, was the continual wrapping in the machine. And with wrapping, sooner or later it starts to smolder, and sooner or later that just gets to be sort of in a fire situation. So those early years, the coffee shop was riddled with, I had a combine fire last night or what have you, and one of our early pioneers by the name of Joey Fedorowicz, he was just one character, but the cab would be actually just full of smoke, and it just goes to the show that once you understand where that smoke is and how it's affecting your combine, it's not as scary as it kind of seems. So there are many of us Canadians who just kind of adapted to that. So the very first year I grew sort of large scale, same thing happened. Smoke billowing out the back of the combine, wet it down. I knew there wasn't a bearing there to overheat, so I didn't worry about it. Didn't park it in the shop that night either. But those are some of the things that you need to consider. So fertility is what Larry's asked me to talk on, and that has the other huge effect on the height of hemp. And so some of you, I noticed, were taking a look at the poster that was just in front of the speaker stand during lunch, and that's something that we did in my previous job with Extension in Manitoba Agriculture, but we wanted to know what nutrients hemp actually takes, because if you go to the University of Google and you Google hemp, you will see that it'll grow on the road. It'll grow with moisture. It'll grow without moisture. It'll grow on a tabletop. And you really need to go to the University of Cornell to learn that it will not do that. You do need to fertilize this crop. If you want a crop, it will, just like as there's grass growing there. Hemp will grow for sure, but it's not going to make a crop. So fertilization is extremely important. And we found that the plant will utilize up to 200 pounds of nitrogen. So everything was in Canadian metric there, which is actually quite easy to convert. So you just convert to pounds per acre. It's a little bit less, but very similar. So about 200 pounds to the acre, hemp will utilize that nitrogen. Now, the thing that you need to be cautious about is particularly on a fiber variety. So Larry said this is about time for harvest. So the plant material still has a lot of nitrogen within the leaves and everything. The uptake has taken up that 200 pounds. When Reuben and I harvest and we take the grain, we have our combine header, and I'll just kind of pull in here. We have our combine header about this height right here. So we've got the rest of this that stays in the field for fiber, and we only want to run the seed heads through the combine so that we minimize those fires, because as fun as they are, just not very economical. So what we try to do there is make sure that we get all those heads, and then the rest of that material that comes out the back of the combine and is sitting in the field has time to ret, and actually a lot of that nitrogen leaches back into the soil. So we don't lose that nitrogen. We only take about 40 pounds per acre of nitrogen when we take the grain off the field. The other very important nutrient is potassium. And potassium is very important in the plants. It kind of is the pumping mechanism to move nutrients up and down, and for straw strength, essentially. And when you have a plant that's as tall as that, it was of no surprise that it is a high potassium user. Both potassium and nitrogen are mobile in the soil, so again, that leaching is a benefit. But we're looking at about 200 pounds of potassium taken off the field if we take it off as fiber. So the two main nutrients that you really need to take a look at on the fiber side of things and keeping an eye on are potassium and nitrogen to make sure that you don't start to deplete your soils. The other phosphate, very important for early season vigor. So Dr. Taylor mentioned that some of the biologicals have that phosphate, in there, which helps with that early season vigor. And I agree. The two most important steps, I guess, are establishing or harvesting a hemp crop is that establishment, and then for us, it's the harvest. The main thing to look at, and I won't go into great detail, but if you come to Albany tomorrow and you get free registration, I will be able to show you some of the tips and tricks that we have for preventing the wrapping in combines that we've used. So duct tape is your number one friend, PVC piping to put in certain areas, and a little tool so you don't bruise your knuckles too much. But very important to have all of that, the phosphate next to the seed without causing a whole bunch of mortality. So about 20 to 25 pounds with the seed is acceptable. It helps with that early season vigor to get hemp out of the ground and give it a little bit extra boost. So with that, I won't take up very much more, but I'm around here, so any questions? And once again, thanks to Larry and the team for such a great field day here. Thank you.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.